So we have seen Taike, we have seen the Han sphere phenomenon. Now let's talk about language policy. A lot of these are things we have talked about before. So this just use this as a quick overview and review of what we have talked about. Language policy of a nation usually mirrors the ideology behind. In Taiwan, before 1987, that was before the martial law was lifted, Mandarin Chinese was highly promoted, and language other than Mandarin was prohibited in school, which we have talked about. You will be penalized in school, especially in the primary school. And the MPC, that's the Mandarin Promotion Council of the Ministry of Education. It's called 国语会, 国语, the national language. Before 1987, and also after 1987, they have two different total different kind of attitude toward the language being spoken here in Taiwan. Also in 1976, there was a broadcasting law which says no more than 1/3 of the program schedules, meaning TV or radio, were to open for languages other than Mandarin. So we have only very limited time for Mandarin, for example, Taiwanese Southern Min program. The one that I just mentioned, the puppet show, it was so popular. But how long was it that I told you? Half an hour during lunchtime, 12:15 to 12:45. And it was so precious. And even some of the Taiwanese program was so limited, you'd hardly have the Taiwanese speaking program like what you have nowadays. Now you even have Hakka channels, and you have Formosan channels, right? That was not likely before. So what's the consequence of the Mandarin Promotion Council policy and also the broadcasting law? So less than 10% of Taiwan population fail to comprehend Mandarin. That means Mandarin has become very popular. Most of the people understand Mandarin. And less young people were able to speak their own mother tongue. That's why we tried to reverse the situation by forcing some kind of 乡土教学, the local language classes, into the primary school. So after 1987, the political slogan became, for those who live in Taiwan but fail to speak Taiwanese, they do not love Taiwan. Okay? Oh, okay. So you have heard about that. That's think about the logic behind. Okay? So a lot of times, political slogan or propaganda has no logic at all. Okay, so if you think twice, you will know what's the meaning behind. And after year 2000, the mother tongue, such as if you speak Southern Min, if you speak Hakka or any Formosan languages, is taught in elementary school because they try to revive the language. It's a language revival. So some fact that we have talked about before. The population of Southern Min on this island is anywhere from 75 to 78%. And Taiwanese, in some sense, is only limited to the Southern Min. And that has been against, this idea has been against by many people, because if you want to talk about Taiwanese, all the tribes, all the people living on this island are supposed to be Taiwanese, not just the Southern Min tribe. So there are some historical pressure as well. Of course, during the Japanese occupation from 1895 is better to 1945. I think there were 51 years people on this island were forced to learn Japanese. And during the 50 years from 1949 to when the martial law was lifted, Taiwan was under the government of the Kuomintang. The Kuomintang ruled the country, so for 55 years. And both promoted their own languages. In the Japanese occupation, Japanese was promoted. In the Kuomintang government, the Mandarin was promoted. So their own languages were promoted as the authoritative language. For example, the 3 steps to Japanize Taiwan. That means when under the Japanese occupation, they have done the language reform in 3 steps. First, they revive the Taiwanese language, and then they go through an intermediate stage, and after a while, it becomes Japanese only. The same thing has been followed by the Kuomintang in terms of making Mandarin as the official or the only language in Taiwan. So, however, during year 2000 and 2008, according to the author of this article, there is no clear language policy. Why? It seems like Southern Min Taiwanese is highly promoted, but there's no written or explicit language policy. They promote general spelling system, which is called 通用拼音. Okay, this is different from the Hanyu pinyin. When we wrote it this way, 通用, this is Hanyu pinyin, right? Or you just understand it as pinyin. When we talk about pinyin or the system that we follow in the PowerPoint here, it's called the Hanyu pinyin. But in Taiwan, during year 2000 and 2008, there was another pinyin system being promoted by the government, which is called general spelling system, which is different from Hanyu pinyin, and it makes things so difficult. For example, if you want to become internationalized, usually you would accept a system that is accepted internationally. So policy based on an anti-Kuomintang tradition and on nationalism, which is indexes to show the ideology behind a language policy, because it's based on the development of democracy or based on the compilation of school textbook. You can see right away, these are the indexes to show the ideology behind the language policy made by a country. These are the 2 clear indexes for that. But in year 2000 and 2008, I think contradictory goals are seen here on this island. In appearance, we want to be globalized. We want to give up protectionism and conservatism. So English was highly promoted as an international language, should be integrated to the curriculum of education. However, in reality, I think it's a kind of nativization, because they are forcing all the minorities to give up their own languages and to learn Southern Min. This was written in the article. And you can think about the situation and read more to judge if this is true in the situation of Taiwan. And teaching native languages as a symbolic gesture. So they are teaching Hakka, they are teaching Formosan languages, they are teaching Taiwanese Southern Min in primary school. But I think 2 hours a week or even 1 hour a week is only a symbolic gesture. So how should Taiwanese be defined? We have an inclusive definition that would be to include Hakka and Formosan languages. But another definition which is exclusive is Taiwanese as a synonym of Southern Min only. And politicians usually can take advantage of the situation depending on what they want. And they could use either the inclusive or the exclusive definition. Okay. So the definition of Taiwanese is still open for different interpretation, because no explicit policy or law has been made. But one question you want to ask yourself is, should such a law be made? Is this a law that will eventually segregate the island? Okay, these are the consequences and the prices that you have to think ahead of time before anything has been made. Okay, so with this, I quickly conclude what we want to talk about in this semester about the language situation and about the culture related to the language.